Hey guys, Technomentary here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be comparing the iPhone XR with the iPhone XS Max edition of it. In this video, we're going to talk about the hardware, the software, overall performance on iOS 14 in 2021 between these two devices. If you're looking to buy either of the devices or looking to upgrade from one to another, we're going to break everything down for you guys. But before we go ahead and get started, if you guys are new to our channel, we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you guys are in the market to buy a phone or looking to get a discounted iPhone, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section as well, where we're hooking you guys with some of the discounted iPhones you can find on the market today. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video review. So the first thing we want to talk about is the actual body, the hardware, and the actual whole piece to these two phones. One of the big thing you'll notice between these two phones are they're actually really huge phones. You know, the Max, of course, is what used to be the Plus version on the iPhone 6, 7, and 8, and Apple has gone away with the Plus naming and started calling its bigger size phone the Max of it. And the unique thing about the XS Max, in this video we're going to just call it the Max, is that it is the only big addition of the X lineup. Of course, you have the regular X, which was released for Apple's anniversary 10-year iPhone, and then you have the XS, which came after that, and then the R right around the same time period. So these phones were released around the same time point. The XS Max came out in around September, and then in October of 2018 the R came out. The R came out with a slight powerful difference in actually the price between these two phones. We'll explain why that is in a bit. But before we do that, if you look at these two phones at a hardware perspective, you'll see that the Max, you know, with the bigger body, does weigh a little bit more because of that bigger body to it and such. You have it weighing around 7.34 ounce or 208 grams compared to the R, which were around 6.84 or 194 grams. So slightly heavier, about 0.5 ounce more. Doesn't really feel like it's heavier. Well, to the normal hands, anyone holding it, feel like they're about the same. But because of the body size difference, we'll talk about the Max, which has a 6.2 inch by 3.0 inch width compared to the R, which has a 5.94 inch of height and a width of 2.98. Both of them do have around that 0.3 for the width of these two phone the depth of these two phones dimension. So they're pretty huge phones because of how big of a build they are. And the build on these two phones, and if we look at the back and compare them, you'll notice another aspect that's different in the video we're going to talk about is the build of the camera. You have the R, which has one 12 megapixel camera versus the Max, which has two dual megapixel camera to it. And of course, the other aspect, such as the body, both of them does have glass back, which allows you to do wireless charging to it, and that at all screen glass on the front as well. But the glass are slightly different on it, which we'll talk about as well. But the build of these two phones are actually slightly different in terms of material that Apple uses. So Apple uses for the R is aerospace grade aluminum versus the Max, which has surgical grade stainless steel. So that's why you'll see the Max being more reflective on the bezel here versus that matte on the R all around build. So more sturdier build on the Max versus the R. And hence why it brings us to the next point of these two phones is the display build. And the display itself is probably the reason why both of these phones have slightly different price point when they were first released in the market. The Max here, as I'm holding, has OLED technology to it. What is OLED? Well, OLED allows the phone to have more resolution and contrast ratio as well. How much more? Well, the OLED on the not on the 6.5 display versus the 6.1 LCD IPS display is that the Max does have 2688 by 1242 pixel resolution at 458 ppi and a 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio to it, versus the R, which has around 1792 by 828 pixel at your 326 ppi. So more ppi, more resolution, and the contrast ratio is only 1400 to 1 on it. So a lot more in terms of that OLED, and that's why the iPhone Max starts at $1099 when first released at the base 64 gig, and you have more storage that you can get out of the Max. It goes up to 256 for the mid grade, and finally 512 for paying a couple of $100 more to get that maxed out storage, compared to the R, which has that IPS liquid retina display, which starts at originally around 749, and if you for the 64 gig, and if you went up to the 128 gig model, which is the max storage that you can get, you're looking at 799. Of course, if you're buying these phones in 2021 at a pre-owned or in Amazon renewed, or just buying it secondhand, you'll find that they're almost about the same price point used when the market. The max of it still is a little bit more, maybe around $100 to $150 more compared to the R, because of the features that it brings on. And the other aspect we're going to talk about the hardware on these two phones is your IPS rating between these two phones. The Max does have an IPA68 rating compared to the R, which has a 68 rating. What does that mean? Water resistivity on the Max gives you 2 meters at 30 minutes versus 1 meter on the R here. Does that really matter if you're taking phone or a dive? Well, no matter what phone you take, if there's a crack or a spring was released, the screen was released, or even any sort of damage to either of these phones, water is going to get in it and you're going to have a water damaged phone. So it's something you might not want to consider doing. Let's talk about the other piece about these phones is the battery life on these phones. What kind of battery life can you expect from both of these two phones? Well, a couple things around the battery. The iPhone Max, because it's a bigger build, bigger body, it does have a bigger battery size to it, but bigger means because of that OLED, it consumes up a lot more power to it. And when you're looking at battery, you want to compare the video playback. The R actually gives you 16 hours of video playback compared to the Max, which gives you around 15 hours. So battery, the R wins by 1 hour in terms of video playback. But if you're a daily user, or that's a light to medium user on a full single charge, most likely both of the phones will get you throughout the day without any issues whatsoever. And let's talk about the other aspect of the phones. Physically, we've seen between these two devices, it's that they have sort of different camera builds. You have that single versus dual 12 pixel camera. The front camera, both of them does have around that 7 megapixel camera for your or selfies and FaceTime as such. And if we open up the actual camera app on these two phones, you're going to notice that around these camera there's slight subtle differences because of that the dual versus that single. First difference is in the photography mode. You're going to notice that the Max does have that 2x the optical zoom, which isn't available because of that second 12 megapixel camera. You get wider angles on your Plus versus the R. And the other aspect around is photography mode. On the R, you only get studio light and contour light compared to the Max, which gives you much more. You have stage light, you have stage light mono, high key light mono as well. But the aspect that we see that because the R doesn't have that dual pixel camera, other aspect is probably around video recording. Both of the phones does do a phenomenal job when it comes to video recording. Of course, they go from 720 HD all the way to 4K at 60 frames per second. Phenomenal job in terms of video recording device, but the Max does win because of the dual camera to it. And let's talk about the next aspect on these two phones, or its software. So both of these phones in 2021 are able to upgrade, download iOS 14. As you can see, we run iOS 14. We have these big widgets on these two phones, which is pretty unique in a lot of ways between these two devices because of running iOS 14, which we found that both of the phones does exceptional job. Whether you're looking for a gaming device, social media, iOS 14, overall experience on these two phones, they work without any issues, from your productivity tool to your social media to your entertainment tool to streaming videos, movies, even music. Both of the phones do a really exceptional job, so you're not missing much whether you get one or the other. One thing we do want to mention is that OLED does give you sort of more realistic picture when it comes to just watching stuff on these two devices. Is that OLED comes really clutch in terms of the resolution because of that higher density to these two phones. So, and that's kind of bring us to the next point when we talk about these two phones is the final comparison. Which phone is better in 2021? Well, one thing we are going to mention about these two phones is that the Max we consider a better phone because of a couple reasons. It does have OLED display, it has a better camera, although the battery on the R wins slightly, not too much, is that 1 hour video playback on it. The Max gives you much more out of it, and since the price between these are probably $100 to $150 difference if you're buying it pre-owned or second hand right now in 2021, you get a lot more to the Max because the Max does compare pretty well with the 12 Pro Max. We've seen, of course, the 12 Pro Max has more features to it, but it's the most closest to the 12 lineup in today's comparison. So there you guys have it for our comparison video of these two phones. Hopefully this video was helpful if you're deciding buying one or the other. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about these two devices? Where, if you're using one or the other one, which one have you using, and what's your experience have been so far? Leave a comment in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.